It is NBA playoff time on Sportsbook Review. I'm Joe Duffy of OffshoreInsiders.com, and along with Troy West of TroyWins.com, we are going to preview the NBA playoffs from a betting standpoint. Every single thing that you, the bettor, must know before placing a bet. But before I do start talking about the NBA playoffs, and we are going to touch on every single series, all 8 first-round series. I do want to remind you, if you're not already subscribed to Sportsbook Review's YouTube page, make sure you do that now. And if there's any questions or comments, suggestions, feel free to leave them. We will certainly respond to them. Well, Troy, it's an exciting time of the year for sure. 4 games Saturday, 4 games Sunday. But first, we'll take a look really at the series in general, and I'll at least make a prediction for each and every series. And if you've got a prediction that you do want to make, do that as well. As I always like to tell my customers, I don't like to make futures bets because I want to make some game-to-game adjustments. And we have a couple, interesting injury situations. Is Kawhi Leonard, is he going to come back? How long is Steph Curry going to be out? Joel Embiid? That's why I don't really like to make series bets, because there's going to have to be an adjustment based on, what's going to happen if this star player is going to miss maybe game 1, but he's going to play in game 2, etc. But let's get straight to it, Troy. The Golden State Warriors and the San Antonio Spurs. Like we said, Kawhi Leonard, is he going to play? He's only played in, 9 games all year, but there's been at least some talk he could possibly come back. Golden State, a prohibitive favorite, minus 1250. San Antonio at plus 850 to win the series. What are you looking at in this series?
Yeah, Joe, you and I discussed off the air, when you look at a series like this, there's obviously no value in the favorite with Golden State, probably no value either with San Antonio. I don't think they have a legitimate shot in this series. I think this is one of those series. A lot of these series are going to be very competitive. There's no doubt about it. I think it's a very exciting time for the NBA playoffs, but this is the one series that the San Antonio Spurs just do not have enough firepower offensively to hang around with Golden State. Golden State's playing really bad basketball right now. But like you said at the start of this, will Steph Curry come back in this series? Will they maybe hold him out and get him closer to 100%, thinking that they could run away with this series? I like Golden State in 5 or 6. I really do. I honestly wouldn't even be shocked to see a sweep in this one. If I was going to be betting my money, that's where it would go. It would be on Golden State in 4, 5, or 6. I don't want to be bold and say exactly where it's going to be, because that'd be foolish, like you said. Foolish to come to say that, because if they're up 3-0 or 2-0 and Kawhi comes back or Curry comes back or doesn't play, a lot of X factors in this one. But if I were to bet it, I do think Golden State in 4, 5, or 6 is where this bet's at. I don't see the Spurs hanging around in this series.
And you bring up a very good point, because at pretty much every single sports book, and of course Sportsbook Review is the place to go for thoroughly vetted sports books. You can bet on a team to win a series in an exact number of games. So, that's one way that if you like Golden State, and most of you probably do, but you, of course, don't want to lay 1250 juice, you can have them to sweep or win it in 5 games. And make sure you go to Sportsbook Review and check the odds there. Tremendous for odds. But, yeah, you can bet a team to win it in an exact number of games. I agree with you, Troy. Not, of course, neither one of us going that far out on a limb. The only way that the Spurs could pull some type of upset is if, Greg Popovich, he likes to be a little coy. What if Leonard somehow actually does come back and then Curry doesn't come back? Now, I think that's probably, the chances of Leonard coming back before Curry are slim, but it's a possibility. I think San Antonio is trying to be very coy about that, and that's, I think, the one possibility how we could make this series interesting. But yeah, if Leonard does not come back, big mismatch inside. Kevin Durant should be able to score at will. I don't think there's anyone who can stop him, sans that miracle comeback by Leonard. The Spurs, though, they are the 4th best defensive team in the NBA this year, so maybe they might be pretty good against a big point spread. The Warriors, of course, do come in ice cold. They've lost 10 out of their last 17. However, ice cold favorites, and we'll have some specific systems, each and every game as the lines are out. But ice cold favorites are actually a pretty good bet in the postseason. The Spurs are the most unlucky team in the postseason, going 5-9 straight up in games decided by 5 or less. Now, when I say unlucky, this was the luck factor. I believe it was invented by Ken Palm, and he invented it for college basketball. But essentially, teams that lose a bunch of close games are considered unlucky and therefore maybe better than their record, while teams that win a lot of close games are considered lucky and maybe not as good as the record. So the luckiest teams would be considered the most overvalued from a handicapping standpoint, the unluckiest, the most undervalued. Golden State, though, would be the 16th luckiest team in the NBA. Warriors had the second worst against the spread margin in the NBA at minus 2.5. However, favorites with a bad against the spread margin, which certainly Golden State would qualify, are a pretty good bet in the playoffs. And again, against the spread margin, some of you might know it as a sweat barometer. It's how much a team does or does not cover by. Yeah, because of there's some uncertainty about injuries on both sides. This is one that I wouldn't really suggest that you make a bet, but Golden State in 5 would be my pick. And like I said, everything's going to have to go right on the injury front for San Antonio to make this interesting. And I know a lot of people, well, it's Greg Popovich. Greg Popovich is a heck of a coach, but he's also had some enormous talent along the way. So if Greg Popovich can pull this off, and it's without Leonard making a dramatic comeback, then yeah, he might be the greatest coach to walk this earth for sure. The Raptors and the Wizards, Toronto minus 650, Washington plus 500. We do have some injury information to talk about in this series. John Wall is going to come back, and he did close the season out on a high note. And Toronto, of course, has had more than their share of disappointments in the postseason. But Troy, what are you looking at in this series?
Yeah, this is, to me, probably the most intriguing one in the Eastern Conference. I mean, there's a lot of intriguing matchups, but this one's weird because Washington going into the season was projected a 3-2, possibly even a team that could potentially win the Eastern Conference. And then John Wall hit a wall. He goes out for the year, potentially catch fire in the postseason. But Toronto, to me, is still the clear-cut favorite in the Eastern Conference. I think they're the team that potentially probably comes out of the Eastern Conference. I was reading a stat today that Toronto was the least injured team this year, meaning they've had their core group of players on the floor throughout the course of the year. They're playing fantastic basketball. They've got well coached. They've got a chip on their shoulder. They are the number 1 seed. They are at home. So I just can't see them losing this series. However, like I said, Washington going in, they're going to have their full starting 5 going into this thing, and they've been such a disappointment this year. I would not be shocked if they came out with the chip on their shoulder and wanted to shock the world. And talent for talent, I think they're just as good as the Raptors. But my official pick would be on the Raptors in 6, potentially 7. I think home court plays a big factor in this one, so I'll go with the Raptors, but in 6 or 7, because minus 650, that really shocked me. And Washington, plus 500 seems like there's a little bit of value there just because they could shock the world, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Toronto's too good this year.
I'm a big believer in the 90% of the game is half mental, where teams that have struggled in the postseason, they do have something to overcome. And, of course, the Washington Capitals are kind of the poster child in sports for a team that always seems to come up short in the postseason. Toronto, not quite as bad as the Capitals, but certainly in recent years they are the NBA team, although they did get a little bit over the hump. This is really a tough matchup for the Raptors. John Wall, he played in only 41 games this year, so Washington is much better than their record stated. He closed out scoring 28 and 29 points. He had 50 assists in his final 4 games. This is not your typical number 8 seed, especially in the East, which is almost always the weaker conference. This is this is a tough spot for Toronto. They earned the number 1 spot, but like you said, Troy, that Washington's much better than the record shows because John Wall is now finally back. Toronto has a plus 0.23 against the spread margin. They've been one of the better spread teams in the year, but favorites in the postseason that have an excellent against the spread margin or a good go against. I'm actually going to call for the minor upset here. Yep, I want to call for the upset. I think it's going to go 7 games, but the Wizards are going to win this in 7. And I might even have another upset and I don't want to get too far ahead. I have one that I'm not going to pick the upset, but I still think is a pretty darn good value, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But Troy, very possibly the most interesting matchup. Well, not so much the most interesting matchup, but the 76ers, I think a lot of us agree, most NBA fans would agree, they're the most intriguing team entering the postseason, of course, having won 16 straight, 8 of them without Joel Embiid, who it looks like he probably will not play in Game 1. We'll see if he plays before this series out. But again, coaches don't like to be all that upfront about possible injuries. But the Sixers, my goodness, they couldn't be hotter. Now, only 3 of those wins were against playoff teams. But however you spin it, that's 16 in a row. And again, without Joel Embiid, they are playing the Miami Heat. Philadelphia minus 470, Miami plus 395. What do you got on this series?
Yeah, when the odds came out on this one, kind of got myself scratching the head because, like you said, the 76ers are absolutely on fire. I don't have their exact margin of victory in front of me, but they are crushing teams over this 16-game win streak as well. I mean, they ended the season on I think a 25-plus point victory on the end of the year as well. This team is playing outstanding. Ben Simmons, potentially here the rookie of the year, and my gosh, a potential MVP candidate. Like you said, the big mystery here, Joel Embiid out. Miami still got some good players, but boy, I think the way that the 76ers are playing and the way they're beating teams, how can you go against them? I like Philadelphia in 5 or 6. I definitely don't think they get a sweep here, but I do think they run away with the series. They're just playing too well. They're clicking at the right time. And boy, that Philadelphia crowd's going to be rocking coming here because they've been waiting a long time for this. And so the fact that they're the 3 seed at home court advantage again, I do think plays dividend in this one. I like the Sixers in 5 or 6.
It might be a series in which Miami does have to win early. They're going to have to, of course, win in the road sometime during the series. But if they can steal one in Game 1 or Game 2, and then all of a sudden Philadelphia starts thinking, they've got their winning streak snapped. They are a young team. That is the biggest disadvantage for Philadelphia, that they're young. Not so much that only 3 of those wins during the winning streak were against non-playoff teams. Like I said, that's an impressive record. They also have won 27 out of 32 straight up, but they haven't been there, done that. And of course, they were really playing hard at the end to get that number 1 seed. Even, one of their biggest regular season victories in years, where they did beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, where LeBron James wound up missing one of those free throws at the end. I said 90% of the game's half mental. Look, Markelle Fultz, he closed the year out with a triple-double. Some of it, when he finally got the triple-double, went over the top of the triple-double. It was in garbage time, but he played very well early in this game because Ben Simmons had foul trouble. He's still struggling to shoot, but he can do just about everything but shoot. So, Fultz looks like he can be a big part. Of course, the big question here is how many games will Joel Embiid play? But I do like the Sixers in 6. By the way, the Sixers against the spread margin of plus 2.4. But again, teams with great against the spread margins as favorites in the postseason are a pretty good go against. Philadelphia in 6, and if somehow Joel Embiid is healthy and ready to play, 35 minutes in Game 1, I wouldn't be surprised if the 76ers get out the broom. Portland and New Orleans. Portland laying at 205. New Orleans getting back just 175. So obviously one of the more competitive series in the first round. Troy, what are you looking at here?
Yeah, this is one that I'm actually going to put an official play. I really, really like Portland in this series, even at minus 205. I usually don't like to go much juice past that, but at 205, this Portland Trailblazer team, I think, is prone for the playoffs. Their guard play with Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, I don't think that the Pelicans can match up there. Yes, Anthony Davis is kind of an X factor in this series, and they have been playing well ever since DeMarcus Cousins went out. They actually kind of elevated their game, but I think that's going to catch up to them. They're not very deep, so if this thing ends up going deeper into the series, I think Portland has a much better bench. I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Anthony Davis, who's playing 40-plus minutes every night, begins to fatigue as the series progresses. I really like Portland in this series. Like I said, I think their guard play is a big way in this series. I think they're going to win it in 5, maybe 6. Could potentially go deep. New Orleans is never going to be an easy place to go play, but I think that the Portland Trailblazers are the much better team. I think they're better coached. I like the Blazers in this one.
All righty. Well, we might possibly have a little bit of disagreement, but certainly not an emphatic disagreement here. Look, Portland, they enter having lost 7 of 12 straight up, but ice-cold favorites are a pretty good bet in the postseason. I go with what I call my Adrian Barbeau theory. Now, Troy, you might be a little too young to even know who Adrian Barbeau is, but Adrian Barbeau, is, somebody who was, when I was about 5 years old, the first celebrity that I had the hots for. She's a little top-heavy, beautiful, beautiful woman. And I think that's how you win in the NBA postseason. You want to have top-heavy talent. New Orleans has that. You're right. They don't have the bench that Portland, they certainly don't have the depth that Portland has. But in the postseason, depth becomes less important because teams don't really go that deep into their bench. And New Orleans does clearly have that one player who can carry a team. Of course, the key here will be, can Drew Holiday and Rajon Rondo come up big on defense against Lillard and McCollum? And they can. Look, they are a bunch of veterans. New Orleans, the number 2 over team, number 1 over team of playoff teams. Of course, that's based on the margin of cover. They've gone over by an average of 2.9 points per game. A little bit of a disagreement, not an emphatic one, but I like New Orleans to pull off the mild upset in 7 games. So, I guess they'll have to win on the road. But I do think New Orleans is the team that is going to win here. Now let's take a look at the Celtics and the Bucks. Very intriguing series. I guess every single one of these series are intriguing, as I said. But the Celtics entered the year as a very legitimate favorite to win the NBA championship. Of course, they made the big free agent signing with Gordon Hayward. And then they made the even, or arguably even bigger trade with the Cleveland Cavaliers to get Kyrie Irving. Just 2 problems. Hayward got injured in the first game of the season, out for the year, and now Kyrie Irving is out for the playoffs. So suffice to say, don't think the Celtics are going to contend for the NBA title, but they are still 150 favorites against Milwaukee at plus 130 in this series. Troy, can Milwaukee pull off the mild upset against a injury-ridden Boston team?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of overreactions, reading a lot of blogs and posts out there that people are jumping all over Milwaukee, and I would take the not-so-fast approach on this one. This Boston team still led by one of the best coaches in all of basketball, in Brad Stevens. He coaches phenomenal defense. I think he's going to have a masterful plan against this Milwaukee team. Boston's still got some young, good, gritty players, and let's not forget they are at home, and they've been outstanding at home this year. To me, it's a total stay away, Joe. I'm not going to give anything official on it. It's a stay away, but I have seen a lot of people liking Milwaukee at that plus money, but I would advise against it. I just think Brad Stevens is too good, and they are home. They're still a 2 seed. This is a good basketball team, even minus those 2 guys. Like you said, are they going to compete to win the Eastern Conference? No. But in this series against the Milwaukee team with really no playoff experience as far as the coach goes, I like the Celtics in this one, but to me, it's a stay away. I'm just going to stay away from it, kick my feet up, but I would advise against Milwaukee, and I've seen a lot of viewers out there really like the Bucks as an underdog.
Yeah, what Brad Stevens has done at both the college and the NBA level, he's clearly one of the finest basketball coaches out there. Milwaukee would certainly fit into my Adrian Barbeau system that I talked about earlier, my Adrian Barbeau theory with Giannis. They're clearly very top-heavy. He can certainly carry a team. The Bucks, though, kind of petered out a little bit towards the end of the year, just 11-12 straight up entering the postseason, while Boston, despite their injuries, a very good 15-8 straight up. Boston third, but Milwaukee sixth in the luckiest team ranks, the luck factor. So not a huge edge there. Milwaukee -2 against the spread margin. So remember, when they are favorites at home, favorites with a bet against the spread margin are actually a pretty good bet. Boston, I would agree with Detroit. Despite all their injuries, they're still, all in all, a better team than Milwaukee. They at least get to the second round. We'll see what they do after that. Too many injuries for them to go very far, but I do think they will get to the second round. So we certainly agree on that. Cleveland and Indiana. Can Cleveland turn it on? Are the Pacers a team that a lot of people thought that would be a team that could contend this year? Will they show that they are actually a legitimate contender? Cleveland -650. Indiana +500. Troy, what do you got?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one for a 4-5 matchup. You never in a million years thought that you would see Cleveland at -650. You wouldn't think you'd see him in the 4 spot, and he sure as heck at -650. To me, again, this is another series I'm just going to put a total pass on. You just don't know what you're going to get from Cleveland. All year long, they've been so bipolar, so inconsistent. I just think you got to stay away from them. Will we see this spectacular LeBron James that shows up come playoff time? Will Kevin Love elevate his games? Will guys like George Hill and Rodney Hood, will they elevate their game? Even Tristan Thompson, will he elevate his game? There's so many question marks that surround the Cleveland Cavaliers going into this series. I wouldn't be shocked if they swept the Pacers, and I wouldn't be shocked that this thing won 7 games and the Pacers maybe even nipped them. So for me, it's a pass. This Pacer team led by Nate McMillan's been outstanding. They've overachieved all year long with really a not so talented roster. They've got Oladipo, who's overachieved, Sabonis, who's overachieved. This is a good Pacer team, very scrappy. Would not be shocked if they took this one the distance, but I also wouldn't be shocked if LeBron and company really elevate their game come playoff time. Tyronn Lue's obviously won an NBA championship, and LeBron's won his share. This is still a veteran team for Cleveland. So for me, it's just a pass. Too many question marks.
I think a lot of Cleveland Cavaliers fans would say Tristan Thompson, his game has nowhere to go but up. I really think maybe a good bet here would be some of the unders, because I do think that Cleveland, they're going to turn it up big defensively. So I very much expect their defensive numbers to be substantially better than they were during the regular season. So we're going to have some totals that are going to be a little bit high. Yeah, they rank 29th in defensive efficiency. No question, intensity goes up in the postseason, and intensity shows up first and foremost on defense. So I would definitely put a check mark in the under column. I would not be surprised to see if we have a lot more unders than we do overs in this series. King James, his minutes are going to go up in the postseason. Oladipo for Indiana, he kind of petered out towards the end of the year, really seemed to tire out down the stretch. These are the 2 luckiest teams in the NBA, according to the team rankings luck factor, so there's not really any edge there. But Cleveland with the worst against the spread margin in the NBA at minus 3.4. And as I said, when you do have a team that is favored in the playoffs, despite a bad against the spread margin, they are a pretty good bet. I'm going to pull a little bit of a surprise here. No, not a surprise on who's going to win this, but as I said, you take a look at those sports books at SBR, you can certainly bet on a team to win it in a specific number of games. And this is not necessarily going to be a pick that I'll release to my customers at offshoreinsiders.com, because, like I said, I want to be able to make those game-to-game adjustments. But I'm going to call for the sweep, Cleveland in 4. Now the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Utah Jazz. OKC minus 140, Utah plus 120. The Jazz, according to a lot of metrics, were the best defensive team down the stretch. That'll come up big in the postseason, and they are red hot. They enter the postseason 17-5, their last 22. As I said, OKC is minus 140, Utah plus 120, so wouldn't be a big upset if Utah pulls off the victory here. But Troy, what are you looking at in this series?
This is actually by far my favorite series in terms of value. I love Oklahoma City to get this series done. The team that's got a lot of critics around them. I've heard a lot of Westbrook, and yeah, he deserves the critics. You know, they ended up winning one more game this year than they won last year, and that's with adding a Hall of Famer in Carmelo Anthony and a guy like Paul George who's in the prime of his career. They won one more game. It's fascinating to me, but they enter the postseason. They've been looking outstanding their last couple games. This is a team that could really shock some teams in the Western Conference. I do not see them taking a first-round exit. I just don't see it. Russell Westbrook's too good. He averages a triple-double again. Like you said, Utah great defensively, but you know this is a tall task to shut down a guy like Russell Westbrook, who I think is going into this postseason with a serious chip on his shoulder. Utah's led by a rookie with Donovan Mitchell. I think he's going to have a tough time really competing at the level that you're going to see Westbrook and Paul George. I kind of throw Carmelo aside. I know where his game's at right now, but Rudy Gobbert's been outstanding, but I think Adams can contain him. I just think too much firepower offensively for Oklahoma City. Billy Donovan's got them playing good basketball. I do not see them taking a first-round exit. Utah's been great this year. They've overachieved. They've shocked everybody, but I think they take the first-round exit. Really like Oklahoma City at minus 140 to take this series.
Yeah, Utah's kind of a poor man's Philadelphia 76ers. They do have some good young talent, obviously not as great as the Sixers do with the young talent, so maybe they're a little bit dangerous, but I've just seen too many studies, not necessarily from a gambling standpoint, but just a one-loss standpoint, that how much experience does mean in the NBA postseason. Paul George, look, I'll give him credit. What a great comeback it's been. Of course, he had one of those ugliest injuries. We talked about the Hayward injury earlier in this video. It was a very similar injury. You know, Paul George, one of the ugliest injuries ever. I would not have guessed that he would have played as many minutes that he did. He averaged, I don't have it in my notes, but I think he averaged like about 38 minutes during the regular season, which is shocking, and played in 79 games. I think, though, he's still one of these players who, as a veteran, could turn it up a notch in the postseason. Like you, I'm not a Carmelo Anthony fan. I have never, ever been a Carmelo Anthony fan, but if there is someone who is really capable of maybe putting it all together, he's always been an underachiever, but dangerous, you know, that not so much in this series, but Oklahoma City could pull off some upsets before this playoffs are out if somehow Melo can really put it together. So Oklahoma City does have some talent, especially a very nice 1-2 punch. Oklahoma City does have a -1 against the spread margin. Now, over 80 games, that's really a right on the cusp of being a quote-unquote bad against the spread teams. But yeah, teams that are bad against the spread and as favorites are pretty good in the postseason. The Jazz have the best spread margin in the NBA at +2.6. The Jazz are the second most unlucky team in the postseason, but they're neck to neck. They're just behind Oklahoma City. I'm with you, Troy. I will go with the veterans OKC and look for their veterans to each put in a couple extra minutes during the postseason. Oklahoma City in 5. And we did save the best for last, not so much intentionally, although I guess the networks want this to be the marquee game, but we're going in book order. The Rockets and the Timberwolves. Well, maybe not the best for last. I'll tell you why I say that in a moment. Not necessarily the best for last as far as a potential upset, but I do think that Minnesota, I'm not going to predict Minnesota is going to win this, but still, at 15-1, Houston -3,000, Minnesota +1,500, and I'll talk about it more in a moment, but I just think Minnesota is much better talent-wise than their record says. Dangerous at 15-1. I don't think they're going to pull off the upset. Not that that's, you know, going that far out on a limb, but I'm telling you, from a money management standpoint, 15-1 is damn tempting. Troy, am I crazy?
No, not at all. Absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's completely bizarre that in both conferences, the number 8 seed going into the season, we would have projected Minnesota to be a 4 seed, a 3 seed, maybe even a 2 seed. I mean, I think a lot of people put them right behind Golden State at the start of the year to enter the playoffs. I mean, this is, like you said, this is an outstanding roster. Jimmy Butler took some time away. He's back from injury, playing much better, looked outstanding actually last night against Denver. Karl Anthony Towns looked good. Teague's playing okay. Andrew Wiggins, like you said, this is an all-star roster. You know, can they get hot at the right time? Yeah, they can. And like you said, at 15-1, great odds there. It's tough to go against Houston. This 1-2 punch of Chris Paul and James Harden and Clint Capella, they've just been way too good this year. So, you know, shame on Minnesota for getting the 8 seed. I think if they were a 7 seed or even a 6 seed, they could do some damage, but they got the tough first-round matchup. But, like you said, there's no value whatsoever in taking Houston at those kind of odds. If you're going to take this series, you take the shot in the dark with Minnesota and hope they put together a 7-game stretch. But so I'm with you on this one, Joe. I think Minnesota would be where the money would be.
Yeah, with Houston, look, Mbah a Moute, I hope I got that close to being right. I was dreading that, and Giannis, I just call him by his first name, but he is going to be out for Houston, and he a key defender, so that's one of the reasons. That's an injury that's going to sneak under the radar a little bit. And you're right, Troy, a lot of us did think that Minnesota entering the year was a legitimate dark horse candidate. I know I've used that term a few times here, but they never quite were able to gel. As you said, Jimmy Butler played only 59 games, so he's a star player, and after missing so many games, there's no question Minnesota's a little bit better than their record. One of the reasons Minnesota's been a little bit of a disappointment, you know, Andrew Wiggins, we thought he was going to be a true star. He turns out a very good player. There's not a team in the NBA that wouldn't like to have him, but he never really turned out to be the superstar that a lot of people thought he would become. But who knows? You know, he's one of these guys that's really capable of having a breakout series. Same for Karl Anthony Towns. So I do think an upset is at least some possibility. Now, and also with the low total, big under teams have been a pretty good over bet And Houston has been a pretty good under team this year. All in all, if you're asking for my official prediction, the Rockets in 6. But from a pure money management standpoint, as I said, Minnesota at 15-1 is pretty darn tempting. And that's one of those things that a lot of people don't understand. Maybe you have to bet the horses to kind of understand where a good long shot is a bet. Even if I had to bet my life on it, of course I'm going to go with Houston. But still, Minnesota at 15-1, I do think an upset is a clear possibility here. So if you want to, if you're a guy who's maybe a dime player, if you just want to put like $100 on Minnesota, I think that's a pretty good money management bet. Well, folks, Troy and I, we are going to be back on Monday. We'll review what has happened in the NBA playoffs so far and take a look at the games ahead. Make sure you subscribe to us at Sportsbook Review. I'll tell you about what people can get at offshoreinsiders.com in just a moment. But Troy, tell everybody what they can get at TroyWins.com.
Yeah, thanks, Dove. If you look at our track record on SBR videos for the NBA playoffs, it's been absolutely outstanding, calling series bets and even game by game. You can track us back, I think, 3 or 4 years that we've been doing the NBA playoffs with SBRodds.com, and it's truly been outstanding. It's one of my favorite times of the year. So come take a look. That's Troy Wins.
And guys, make sure you join me at offshoreinsiders.com. Joe Duffy's picks. Look, the NBA Zigzag Theory had the worst year ever, 22-42. Luckily, we don't subscribe to that, but we do have a bet, what I call the better-looking stepsister, which is the bounce-back theory that has to do with teams off of a loss under certain circumstances do extremely well. And in addition, quite often teams off of a win are a good bet. I enter the postseason on a 31-11 run in basketball. That's college and the NBA combined at offshoreinsiders.com. And we will be back here at Sportsbook Review on Monday as we will preview the rest of the NBA playoffs.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.